Thank you, Mide. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us here. So today's conversation will take on a fuller nature of what it means to be a CEO of a fintech, and we have two fantastic global examples in Tayo and in Adal. So my questions today, if it's available, would be to kind of walk in your shoes a little bit and ask you some questions. And forgive me, maybe because I have some insight, I might go off the beaten path, and I want to talk about the stuff that doesn't really get talked about in these types of sessions, right? I mean, there are some arguments about too many fintech panels, but hopefully this one will take us in a different direction. So perhaps for those that may not know you two as well, I can't imagine why they'd be here if they didn't. Tayo, perhaps you could just give us a quick introduction, and then Adal.
Awesome. Adia, thank you very much for hosting this session, and Endeavor, thank you for having this day really of catalyzing conversations, and very excited to be part of Endeavor. My name is Tayo Oviosu. I am the founder and group CEO of Paga. We're the leading mobile payments company here in Nigeria, and I'm an Endeavor entrepreneur, and very excited about what Endeavor is doing towards encouraging and entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs on their journey. So looking forward to the conversation today with my good friend Adal, who I've met through Endeavor, and a big fan of him and what he does.
Excellent. Let me go on my end, and thank you very much, Adia, for the time. Thank you, Endeavor. This is super excited to be here. I was very excited to have this conversation with Tayo. I'm also a big fan of him, and I look forward to sharing a little bit of the things that we do. On my end, in Kueski's is a company that started in Mexico. Our focus is that we provide a series of financial services so that we can enable and facilitate access to financial services in Mexico. We started with the goal of democratizing credit in Mexico, using machine learning to better serve the Mexican community in terms of lending products. We started with a lending product, and now we have another product called a buy now, pay later product, which basically enables people to buy and purchase items online. So thank you very much for the time, and excited to be with you guys.
Fantastic. All right, let's get started. We'll just jump right into the personal, shall we? Straight, no chaser. So I wanted to talk to you guys about, being a CEO of your startups through the various funding rounds, right? So many startups face a challenge of a change in leadership and all of the sort of elements and struggles that come with that. But obviously, to be CEO of your company at seed stage and all the way through to Series A, Series B, and further, right? Or even starting off as maybe a solo founder and then bringing on additional founders. I wanted each of you, starting with you, Adal, to talk about your experience as a person and as a leader, and how have you evolved?
So the interesting thing about founding a company, and the thing that typically it's very difficult to get as a founder, because nobody tells you this, or it's more difficult people to tell you this, is that you need to evolve yourself, and you need to, the job description that you have, and the type of person that you are on every stage of a company is going to be different. When you're starting a company, you're typically a person that's looking to be 100% product driven, and you and your co-founder and the series of early stage people, the only thing you're actually doing is you're building a product and you're speaking with customers. That's the only thing you do. And then once you have some initial traction, you start thinking about raising some initial capital, because you need to fund this, you need to grow this. But pretty much like that, that's it. Speaking to customers, building the product, and then fundraising. And then as you scale, and it becomes a company that's more like let's say 10 to, let's say 50 people, you start having people that are leading other people, and you're not leading directly those people. And then what's happening is like you have, let's say like managers or leaders or vice presidents or etc. That are helping you, establish and professionalize the company in one aspect, and establishes the processes and manage the team, etc. So then you become, like you start knowing less people than the type of people that you typically knew, because you're earlier in the process. You typically knew every single people in the company, and you had lunch with them, and you know every single part of their aspects of their lives. And now you know a little bit less, but you still know almost everybody, and you kind of like say hi to everybody, etc. And you typically need to manage managers, right? And you need to lead managers, etc. And now you need to think a little bit more about building an executive team, if I can say it this way. And then once you become a bigger company, at least in our end, in my experience, more than 200 people, what happens is like you have leaders of leaders, the people that you're currently working more often. You have leaders of leaders, and in this situation, you get to know less all the people in the company. You focus yourself on trying to see how can you communicate better to the company. How can you establish a culture that you like, not only you become an evangelist, but at the same time you want to make sure that the people that are reporting to you can become an evangelist, so their managers can exercise and evangelize the type of culture that you want for the company. So that's a challenge. And from the team perspective, and then from the company perspective, I think you need to start things. You need to think about different ways, like what are the type of C-level people you want to bring into the company? What are the processes? Like the whole thing you need to do around how you design the corporation and the decisions that you make. And it becomes a multi-product company, so you need to think about not only the ecosystem you need to build, at least in my experience, but also the whole, like it's not a one product, it's the ecosystem. And it's not, and you stop building the product yourself, but you need to think what are the type of org designs, processes, people, culture that you need to build so you can enable your own organization to build the products. That's the different type of challenges that you need to have.
But I want to bring this back to you. How did you change, right? It's like, I like how you put it. You said, I started this company and all I had was the product. And then all of a sudden you became a CEO and a leader of leaders of people you may or may not really know. So how did Adal change, right? Between these funding, because you argued that, the company changes, but then the people you hire change, and then the CEO you have to be changes as well. So from a personal perspective, how did you know when you needed to change, and how did you navigate that? Did you have support?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did have support. I'm a big fan of having a coach, for example. It's you change in many aspects, right? You change in the aspect of I remember when we were raising our first financing round, the initial financing round, I only had I put in all of my savings into starting Kueski, and there was a point in which I couldn't, it was difficult, we spent all of our savings in Kueski, and I only had $1 US in my bank account, and I owed a lot of money in my credit cards, and I only had I only had that in my car. And it was not a fancy car at all, so it was just like a very normal car, and I was essentially broke, right? I think that when I realized about that situation, I actually felt like, well, this is what they say it is to be like a founder, right? Like, you need to be broke, you need to suffer, you need to have issues trying to fundraise. But that I never felt that was a difficult time for me. I even felt a little bit proud of being in this situation because it felt like I was living life. I was living the entrepreneurial life, if I can say it this way. We were a very small company. We probably only had like 3 or 4 people in the team. And I remember when that happened, it was a lection for me on resilience, and it helped me kind of like understand what the life is about, right? In terms of starting a company, it's not easy at all, and people say it's not easy, and people sometimes say that they see founders as, oh, it's super cool, like the founder is and the reality is the majority of the time you get rejected by investors, you get rejected by candidates that you want to, you want them to join your company, you get rejected by customers that don't want your product. So I would say if I could say if there's a way I've grown, it actually makes you more humble, right? It makes it's so difficult, and it's and you get to bump into different type of obstacles. It makes you more humble. It makes you more resilient, and it lets you know that there's so many ways you can actually learn from other people. I don't know, if that makes sense. Or Tayo, anything?
I think it does. I think it does. It made sense to me anyway. And for me, this is the stuff that I wish was talked about enough or talked about more. Before I joined this class, nobody told me how emotional it was going to be. So forgive me if I'm on a bit of a mission to fix that today. And I couldn't be asking you guys. So Tayo, same question to you, but I think there's a slight difference between perhaps your journey and Adal's, wherein somewhere along your journey, you brought in a co-founder, right? So talk about, how you decided that was the person you were, comfortable being in the trenches with, and how, how that changed things for you from seed stage and forward.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it's a really good point. And Adal, I really resonated with what you're saying, especially about just building resilience. When I started the business, and I started thinking through, who would I want to come on the journey with me? The first question was, who are the people who I know that I really respect their intellect and their capability, but also who I felt very comfortable that I could go have a beer with, and I would have a good time, right? That was my criteria, actually. And the reason why I actually framed it that way for myself is that, if we're going to be in the trenches together for a long time, then I want to make sure that this is someone I really enjoy their company. I don't think it's actually that we're best friends, but that we're good friends and that we can actually go out and have a great time together. And for me, Jay Alabraba, who's my co-founder, kept coming back to mind for me. And as I shared with someone actually just this last week, how grateful I am that he came on this journey with me over the last 11 plus years. I can't even imagine being here without him. He has been, amazing shoulder, amazing wisdom, to really many times correct me from wherever I was, but knowing that you're not alone when you're going through these tough moments, and there's somebody else who you can share with, who also is in it with you, who is also helping you think through it, and we're going together makes a big difference. And I think for me, the biggest way I've changed, and the first big aha was that don't carry all the burden alone. And it's a shame that actually took me having a bit of a medical condition for me to realize that, right? There was a day I was having a meeting and I just felt my heart beating. I was just like, what is going on? I actually had to end the meeting and call the doctor. And she was like, it sounds like you have heart palpitations. I've never heard the word before. Like, what are heart palpitations? And, thankfully, my mom uses the same doctor. And she's like, look, there's a history of heart of high blood pressure in your family, right? And so we quickly went to go check that, and it turned out blood pressure, right? And one of my friends, who's also an entrepreneur, she said to me, she said to me at the time, she said, Tayo, the vision you have is going to take a long time to come to fruition. You want to be around for that. So you need to bring others into whatever the stress is. You can't carry all the stress by yourself. And I never forget that wisdom, right? Because that then really was when I started realizing that I need to always share, not just with Jay, but with my board, with my investors, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? We're in it together. How do we figure it out? And I think that's one area that I think I've really grown in, is in being transparent with my leadership team, being transparent with everybody about what's going on, where we are. And that has really helped me. And definitely all the things that Adal said as well. I've seen my role within the business change from doing the work to really being the cheerleader, the salesperson, the mentoring and helping the other leaders and executives in the organization as they lead and do the work of building the business itself.
It's good to hear that. But that dovetails quite nicely to my next point. And I wanted to ask about the relationships, the ones that are personal to you as CEO. Who do you do your one-on-ones with? Who do you have supports? Do you have groups of others? Do you have like a CEO support group? I definitely believe in those, but who is in yours? And how do you use your boards or your advisory boards? Talk to me about the relationships that were meaningful to you or are meaningful to you. And if that changed from stage to stage, please share that as well.
Yeah, I mean, let's take that first. I mean, on my end, it's changed over time. I think, first of all, when I was looking at different ideas, I had 3 people who I went to on a regular basis. So can you just spare 30 minutes with me and we have coffee and I share ideas with them. We eventually became our board of advisors and our board members. And then some of my investors, I would have regular check-in one-on-ones with. But I went through a long period where I would say that I didn't have, aside from the investors on board, I didn't have people who I could just go to. And that has changed over time. Initially, you know, my wife also took that role, but frankly, I mean, depending on you, I don't recommend that. I think that also has its own sort of sets of issues. But she's still a great advisor. Well, you know, and I can not even think of one piece of advice she's given me that was wrong. You know, but now what I've been able to do more recently, and actually through Endeavor particularly, is connect with other CEOs. And now I actually have a prayer group of 4 of us that we meet on a monthly basis. We're meeting tomorrow, and that's been super helpful, right? To have other people who are in similar stage business as you, of your business. They're in other parts of the world, and you can be 100% open with, knowing that everything is in confidence and that they have nothing to gain other than to help you, right? And likewise you them. So that's been really helpful to me, and I think it's something I would like to continue. I actually wish I had it much earlier. They've really helped me through this lockdown coronavirus period in navigating all the different things that have popped up throughout this period.
Okay. Adal, your relationships, tell us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of one-on-ones, I typically do those with my direct reports. It was, before the COVID-19 crisis, I like to kind of go downstairs and walk with them and have kind of an informal conversation. And there's a series of techniques on how to do the one-on-ones. But typically it's suggested that you typically have to speak 20% of the time and then 80% of the time. Whoever is reporting up, or to you is going to be the person that needs to speak more. So I typically do those. I initially did those every week, and then and then my staff team started to become bigger in size. So there was a point in which I think I had like 8 or 9 people reporting to me, and it felt like a little bit of a burden, and I couldn't support them as much as possible. So I'm a big fan of having smaller teams, like 5 to 6 people reporting to you, but that you actually invest a lot of time in the people that are reporting to you, so you can enable them. So that's actually one of the things that have been changing. So typically you have less people, you can invest a lot of time in them, and then as the company goes, you have more people reporting to you. And you can invest less time, and then back again you can reshuffle and rework, and then you have less people reporting to you, and you can invest more time in them. But typically, doing one-on-ones at least every couple of weeks, I think that's been a good practice that it's been working with me. And in terms of the people that I speak to, so I like speaking with. I think I've been fortunate that my for example, my board members and investors, I've been able to build up a really strong, a good relationship with them, and they actually support us. It's difficult because some board members are more supportive than others. For me, it's kind of like, let's say it's like 3 types of board members. I'm going to say it this way. The one of them is when things go not as good as you wanted to, you're going to be afraid of telling them. And then there's a board member in which something doesn't go as you wanted to, and you can tell them, and you're not going to be excited about telling them, but that's going to be fine. And then there's the board members in which when things do not go the way you wanted, you want to speak to them because they're going to help you. They're going to become a sounding board. They're going to enable you. They're going to support you. They're going to, So I think I've been fortunate to have board members and investors in general that are very, very supportive, and that when things don't go the way you want it to go, they're going to be supportive. So I have a really strong relationship with them. I've been building that relationship with them, and that's worked a lot. I think, as Tayo mentioned, Endeavor has a phenomenal job connecting you with other founders and with other experts in the industry. And that's helping a lot. That's been super helpful. And so I don't want to go dig a lot into that, but I think that's a fantastic way to do that. But the other thing I would like to say is you can be a best friend of very successful founders and CEOs by reading their biographies and seeing their interviews, and do you know what I mean? So you can if you have somebody you admire, you can just go ahead and read them and see what they do, and read their biography and see their interviews and see, and they probably don't know you exist, but they exist, and you see how their problems, how they think, and their mindset, how they're solving problems. I took this concept from Charlie Munger, from Warren Buffett's partner, vice president of Berkshire Hathaway. He reads so much from so many people, and he says he makes his best friends are the people that some of them have died, but he learned from them, and he can see how people think. So I would like to add that reading biographies and seeing, for example, in YouTube, how people are being interviewed and how people react and how people think, I think it's a phenomenal way to get some level of advice, indirect advice to your company.
Interesting, very interesting. My next question would be about boards. So beyond the formal requirement of having a board, perhaps as an outcome of a funding event, do you feel like you should have had a board earlier? Or maybe you can talk to us about how you specifically use your board. Tayo?
It's a good question. I mean, I've always had a board, and I think that sort of, from my perspective about accountability, I think is really important, and I want to have people that hold me accountable. So from pretty much the beginning, I had a board of advisors, and then it became a formal board at our Series A. And the way I think about the board has changed over time a little bit. But I think at the very beginning, your investors want clearly investors always want board seats, right? and that starts shaping the board. But what I started realizing is that it is important to also get operators or people who have operated businesses on the boards. Now that becomes challenging because, I also would argue that you don't want to get people who are CEOs of existing businesses on your board unless you're a very big company, right? Just because the time they would have to really think about your business is limited. So I think where it's looking for people who are CEOs that have, or not CEOs, but they're executives in an organization, but have the bandwidth to be able to not just attend the board meetings, but actually meet with you outside of the board or meet with your team outside of the board and provide specific advice. So the way I think of my board now is in terms of skills and expertise, right? So I know I have my investor people, but even within that group, I've now figured out, okay, who is better on what topic, right? And I know, and I channel those conversations outside of the board meeting to that person. And I've actually leveraged that and figured out even committees for the board and who's on what committees. But then for the independent directors, I've said, okay, what other skills do we need around the table, right? We're a business primarily in Nigeria today. So we need someone who is operating in Nigeria, and who's run a business in Nigeria, and who just understands the intricacies of that and can bring that to the board conversation. So we have somebody who fits that bill. Then I'm like, look, we need somebody who has global payments experience because we have ambitions beyond Nigeria, but also understands the informal nature of Nigeria. And so we actually went out and searched, and we found a great board member who ex-PayPal, who's still in Fintech, and understands what's going on from India, so understands the informal nature of Nigeria and the kinds of markets that we're going into. So I think it's important to think about the composition of the conversations that you will have and the skills you're bringing in. But I also think it's important that you think of how do you leverage their capabilities, not just for yourself, but even for your team to leverage, right? One of our independent board members has regular sessions with members of my team that I'm not involved with because he has specific expertise in the area of what they're doing and can lend them advice around that. And so we structure those kinds of conversations. So I think being thoughtful about how you want to structure the board, how you want to have the conversations, what skills you need, and how you can leverage people outside of the formal board meeting, I think is really, really important.
Fantastic. Adal, do you have anything to add to that, or does it sound similar to your experience?
I would just like to add that when you build a board, it's kind of like you need to recruit and manage a board. It's the same thing, and people think, oh, it's a board, you inherited that, etc. But it's not true. It's kind of like when you recruit your executive team and you manage your executive team, there are things you need to think about. You need to be aligned in values. You need to create rapport. You need to obviously bring people that have experience that support, complements you. So there's a series of things that you need to do, and it's being, I think it's equally or even more important. I don't know, recruiting the correct board members as it is with your executive team. It's very, very important, and it's very difficult to do because your board is essentially you're reporting to the board, right? So it's a very difficult situation how you recruit it and how you manage it. But I think and then one thing is I would like to add is at least in Mexico, there's the amount of board members that have women in their board members is small, and I think that's something we need to improve. Everybody, we need to include more women, and we need to include more diversity in the board. So in our case, we one of our independent board members, she's a woman, and she's doing phenomenal. I truly recommend founders to think about, again, the same way you think about recruiting your executive team and managing your executive team and and having diversity in your executive team, you need to do the same thing to your board.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, it's all about the relationship, right? And it's a long game. So I think that's very, very, very key. Yeah.
Okay. So to the founders in the audience, boards are not just annoying. They're not, they definitely can be useful if you take the time to think about what you actually need. So I think, of course, you can derive more value from the relationship when you have, one, some clarity about what you need, and two, a board that actually answers you at that level of clarity. Okay, all right, so switching gears a little bit. You both started companies that are now becoming platforms, right? Multi-country platforms. But talk to me about, again, as Adal mentioned, starting off with one product in mind, and then growing and evolving, and the pivots and the roadmap changes and all of that. Tayo, maybe you could start from, how much fidelity there is in your original vision of Paga and where you ended up now.
Yeah, the original vision remains pretty much what we're doing, right? Which was, we want to digitize cash and cash transactions and deliver access to financial services to the mass market. But how we've gone about it, very different, right? Than what I thought in the very beginning. If you had told me in 2009 that we would have as big an agent network as we do, or that the agent network would be core of our business 8 years later, I would have said, no, that's not the case. We need an agent network, but I don't think it would be as big as it is, etc. Right? But as you start going into the market, in our case, we realize that, wow, actually, the problem is even deeper than we thought. And so I think you have to be flexible. We review our strategy every 18 months. And, one of the big things that changed when you think about growing the business, and Adal alluded to this, right? Starting small, now 500 people, is that, at some point when we're 20 people, we could all get in a room and everybody understands the strategy and everybody understands what they're going to do and they go after it. Well, 500 people, you can't do that. You can't get into a room literally and do that. So we actually, whenever the strategy changes, you have to this time to let everybody understand it, contribute to it, understand it, and then actually execute, right? And you have to give that execution some time as well. So for us, we've gone through different phases. I mean, for example, when we started the business, we were very focused on, we're going to be Africa-wide, right? And we've changed that over the last year and a half, right? That we are actually going to look at emerging markets outside of Africa, and rather look at large countries. And so Mexico, where Adal is actually the next market we're launching. And even that has its own sort of journey, right? And everybody was usually like, wow, what? Why are you going to Mexico? It's so far away. But even getting to that decision point was very interesting for us, right? In terms of how were able to get ourselves convinced about leaving Africa. And I shouldn't say leaving Africa, we're not leaving Africa. We're launching in other African markets as well. I mean, launching somewhere outside of Africa. And then going to figure out what market it was. I mean, we did a lot of desktop research and I literally got on a plane, right? And it was the most travel I'd done in a period of 3 months, because I was very clear that if I wasn't convinced, there's no way I could convince my investors or board or team, right, to come along with it on that kind of a journey. So, I think if anything I've learned is that be flexible in your thinking. Don't hold too many things, if anything, sacrosanct. And even when you go into meetings with your team, right? For example, I'll give one very clear example. Today, our purpose is that we want to make it simple for 1 billion people to access and use money. Now, we defined that in about a year and a half ago. And I remember very well going into that offsite week, knowing that I wanted us to talk through our mission and our vision. But I had no clue what would come out. But I was also clear that this 18 people that were with me on this journey at that offsite are the key people that have to be bought into whatever that purpose is before even the rest of the company, right? And the beauty of that was that what came out was jointly created, and I loved just experiencing that 2-3 day process that we went through to create that, right? And the very strong debate and discussion and healthy discussion that went on, because now they all carry that purpose, and now they've also now gone and evangelized that to the rest of the company, and everybody's like really behind it. And so I think not holding anything sacrosanct, knowing that you really, if you want to go a long journey, you have to go with people. They have to be brought in to go along, right? And so carrying them along helps you navigate whatever obstacles you might face along the way.
Indeed. All right, so let me switch gears a little bit as I switch to Adal. Let's talk about product market fit. Do you know it when you see it? Is it a gut feeling, or do you see it in numbers on a dashboard?
So no, we definitely see it in the numbers. You feel it and you see it in the numbers. So on our end, what we do is we do a series of things before we understand if there's some level of product market fit. A way you can do it is you talk to your customers, and you ask them, hey, I want to have feedback on my product, and essentially you ask them the question: if I disappear this product for you, like if you couldn't use this product anymore, how disappointed would you feel, right? And if people say, I would feel extremely disappointed, like they can say, I wouldn't feel disappointed, I would just feel disappointed, I would feel extremely disappointed. So there's a rule that says that at least 40% of your customers need to say they would feel extremely disappointed, so that you have a product market fit. So it's one thing. It's just like speaking to them, and having 40% extremely disappointed people. The next one is, there's something. It depends on what is product market fit, right? So sometimes some people tie it to user adoption, and some people tie it to monetization. Another way to measure it is, if you have product market fit, you should be able to acquire and grow exponentially a customer base with positive unit economics, right? And if you cannot do this with positive unit economics, it means that it's not resonating with people, with your customer base, and it's not becoming as viral as you wanted it to become, and that's why it's more expensive from the unit economic perspective. So that's a little bit of the way we think about this, and the way we do, the way we do is just like the ending point is, the way we think about products is we typically test them even as a concept, and we like testing several products and speaking with our customers, and then you kind of like have an idea on which set of products or what type of what are the jobs maybe like what are the jobs to be done that we want to focus on when building new products. And sometimes it's not about the product, it's about the jobs to be done. What is this product solving that you need to think about when building a product, so that like somebody says, when somebody, there's an example, I don't know if you've seen the example in Clayton Christensen in Disruption Theory, where he says that they made this research on a milkshake in a restaurant, and people thought that it was a milkshake for their kids, and they discovered that the jobs to be done for that milkshake was actually, people wanted to buy the milkshake drive-through. They bought it drive-through, so it had to last at least half an hour, so they could make their journey from their homes to their jobs, like to their workplace, enjoyable with a milkshake. So the jobs to be done is, entertaining users while they drive to work. And so when you think about even the same product, sometimes it's not only about the product, it's about the jobs to be done that the product is solving based on the market. So I would also mentioned, you should definitely think about that as well. And that changes the perception on how you think about building a product.
Okay. Taya, what's your product market fit perspective?
I agree with what Adal said. Actually, I was taking notes. I mean, look, I think you have to see it in the numbers. There's just no way around it, right? And it's and if you don't have product market fit, then try again, right? Because it is a lot easier to scale a product where the demand is there rather than try to create demand for something, right? So if you can take the approach of learn fast and get early signals and fail fast, better, right? And so that's sort of the way we think about it, is that we go out and talk to several customers. There's a product we're building now that is brand new for us. And before we did one engineering line of code, we've already done several hours of talking to the target audience to understand their need, understand what's going on, what the problems may even be. And we continue to go back to that same audience of people and also new people that we come into along the way. And then before we even launch big to the market, there's going to be an MVP version that we will then test with a small group of people, right? So I think the idea of if you can test with a small group of people, see what they like, get them really excited about it. If they get really excited, awesome. And then you build out from there, right? And then you actually learn. It's better to do that than build something that's a lot of features, a lot of things in it, and then nobody uses it, right? Frankly, we've even seen that with internal products, just start small, and then the team will tell you what they need in the product, and you keep adding to it rather than you do a lot of things and then nobody's using whatever it is. So I think I would always recommend that you are just ears down, listening to the market, what your audience is telling you.
Yeah. Okay. One thing that I would like to add, just I think a company that does really well product market fit is Amazon. And what they do is they use it themselves. Like for AWS is an example, but they've done this with logistics and others. So they use the product themselves, and then they extend it to other companies. So it's not only a phenomenal way to see how build a product, but it's also Amazon is turning every cost structure into a revenue structure, because whatever they're using, they're turning it into a product. So that's we're doing that in Kueski as well. There's a product that we're currently launching, and the first thing we did is we're going to use it ourselves in Kueski for several months, and once we discover the pains on that product and we feel the pain ourselves on what is not working, then we're going to be extending it to other companies, and that's actually and other people, and that's actually working well for us.
By the way, just on Amazon, before we move on, one prediction is that in the next 5 years, Amazon's going to launch its own productivity set of tools, right? Like Microsoft Word, a word processor, Excel, all that stuff, because they've been using their version internally for years, right? Nobody uses Google Word, Google Docs, or Microsoft Word at Amazon. Amazon has its own version of all of these products that its teams are using. They're learning. They're going to bring it out on AWS at some point, right? Because they've already perfected. Yeah.
I bet. I actually also think, since we're talking about platforms today, that's actually the way to migrate from a single product to a platform is to take your product and then make your product and any sort of unit economics improvements that you found, make them available to your competition. I guess that's actually the path, in my view anyway, to going from product to platform. All right, so let me pop over to the questions here. We may have actually already addressed a couple that came up before. Well, there is one here for you, Tayo. Okay. What are some of the assumptions you find people making about running a startup in Nigeria? And before you answer, I want to say that most people assume that the assumptions are negative, but I think it's usually, it goes either way. But Tayo, please, your experience.
Wow. I think the biggest assumption people make because of the whole 419 fraud thing that Nigeria has out there is that you have to be corrupt in some ways to be able to run a business, or you have to face giving bribes to run a business in Nigeria, and that's not true. I think you can very much just say you don't do that and move on. You will lose some deals, no doubt, but it's not true. I think for me, I don't know. I actually just faced one very recently, right, in the last day that I was just totally blown away, and I'm completely surprised by. So there's a deal that we're working on, and the person who's running this deal on the other side, this is a banker, had a diligence call with one of my investors, and the first question was to ask if Tayo is the only one in this company. And this is someone I've been dealing with for months, right, almost a year, if not more. And I'm just sort of like, where is that coming from? Like, is it because I'm in Nigeria asking this question? Because there's no way that I'm the only one in this company. So I don't know. It's there's some just weird assumptions that people make in terms of how things are done. Like, it's the same business as business in Mexico or in the US, same sort of workforce, maybe educational levels are different and things like that. But same level of professionalism, right, that you get. So I think the more, my big thing is just people come and visit, right? And if people come and visit, then they see it and they realize that it's not maybe as they may have imagined, as undeveloped as they may have imagined, right?
Actually, Adal, for the sake of argument, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the same question, because I think we as Nigerians often feel like we're the only ones affected by these issues. What cultural misassumptions, if I may create a word, did you face in being a founder and trying to export technology from Mexico?
So I think it resonates what Tayo mentioned. So, for example, in our case, Mexico is also known to be a country that has a lot of corruption. But I think specifically for technology entrepreneurs, it's less that of an issue. Like, it's more, at least in Mexico, it's more people that want to open a store, and they need to get kind of like some sort of like a license and things like that. That's the type of situation in which it's being a little bit more difficult, but not for technology entrepreneurs. And then what else?
People don't assume that you're like the star in Narcos Mexico or something like that. There were no like.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would say I think what Tayo mentioned is I think in many aspects Mexico is very similar. Yeah, I think it resonates very, very closely on that aspect.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. And that'll lead me to like my last question for both of you. Are we having too many conversations about fintech? Should we stop?
Adal, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's an interesting what happened with the COVID-19 crisis, and we're doing this online, is that I think it facilitates and enables, and it actually makes it easier to have people to jump into a quick 30-minute, 60-minute call and share their experiences, right? So the pros on that is that you don't need to travel to other countries in the world to meet and speak about what's happening between, countries and regions in different parts of the world, right? So I think that's a positive. But it's a positive because you can attend, and you can attend many more conferences. Now the thing is, what's happening is people are leveraging that, and now you can see conferences in every part of the world about different topics. It's easier to recruit people to speak. It's easier to recruit people to listen and participate in these conferences. So I think moving forward, we're going to go into a world in which there's a secular change in which people are going to be doing this, and I think people need to be, they're going to be more selective on the type of content that they need to kind of like listen to and attend. And I think this is not only related to conferences. I think this is happening with podcasts and audio, right? Like you're starting to see a lot of companies that are creating businesses around audio, and Spotify is acquiring so many podcast companies, etc. And so I think this is we're starting to see a trend similar to what happened with websites a few years ago. I think the same thing is going to be happening with video and audio, and that's going to be something that we need to figure out as humankind. I don't know, Tayo. What?
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. I mean, look, I think that in terms of too many conversations on fintech, look, the problem sets that are being solved by financial technology will continue to remain forever, frankly. Fundamentally, I like to call it the key exchange problem. I have something of value, you have something of value. How do we exchange that? The solution will always keep changing. So I think that always brings the conversation back to the fore. And like Adal was saying, now in this world, it's easy to have, I'm in Nigeria, Adia, I think you're in Nigeria, Adal is in Mexico, and we're having this conversation, and there are people from all over the world listening in, right? And that makes it a lot easier. So I think we will have more fintech conversations because there is a lot going on in the space, and it's growing and moving at a very rapid pace. I mean, I always give the example that when I started Paga and I told people of a cashless society, people thought I was crazy, right? At one point, I even asked my co-founders, like, who was like, he thought it was crazy anyway. I was like, well, but what do you see that made you come on this journey, right? There was no Bitcoin, right? There was nothing then. So now those things are here, people can see it a bit more. And so there's a lot of innovation that's already coming to the fore that is going to lead to more conversations. My hope is that we will, from those conversations, actually lead to action, right? And that people will be inspired to set up the next big thing, right? And I think from where I sit, I want to find who are the next generation, who are those people who are going to be leading the innovation that we cannot even think of yet, right? And somehow support them, right, on their journey. And hopefully, all the work we're doing, aside from product market fit today, is inspiring other people to also look at entrepreneurship, look at being part of the journey, whether they're companies doing these things as well. So let's have more fintech conversations. It's all good.
All right, fantastic. Well, I've had a really good time getting to know both of you. Fun fact, Tayo and I went to secondary school together, so I've actually known Tayo for a very, very long time. But even today, I've heard things about Tayo that, I didn't know. We've never really talked about his Paga experience to this depth. I hope this was useful to everyone. I hope it has pulled back the curtain a little bit. You too can build a fintech platform. Just follow Tayo and Adal's advice, and all the best. Okay, so Endeavor team, can somebody pop back up? Thank
you, Adia, for hosting this.
Thank you. Thank you, Tayo, as well.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Progresses.
Thanks for sharing, by the way. Yeah, you guys, this is such a joy, right? This is very precious. People don't open up like this. I mean, we got two guys to actually talk about their deepest and darkest tears. So thankfully there were no tears, but next time.
Oh, I've had tears.
Okay. Fantastic. Mide, is that you that's gonna come back up and take this there we go.